Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Thursday, March 31st. We start the cast tonight with the frustration among Afghan interpreters who help the Canadian military. They say the federal government hasn't lived up to its pledge to bring family members to Canada. So they are launching a hunger strike today in protest. They claim relatives have died while waiting for paperwork to be processed in Afghanistan. New Democrat MP Jenny Kwan suggests the government could speed things up by treating families of Afghan interpreters the same as Ukrainian refugees and process their papers once they are safe within Canada. In the Vatican today, a 2-hour meeting with Indigenous delegates resulted in no formal apology by Pope Francis for the Roman Catholic Church's role in the residential school system. Although the Pope did not commit to coming to Canada, delegates left the meeting feeling hopeful. Chief Gerald Antoine says there is hope for change, which will bring dignity, equality, and trust. Former Assembly of First Nations National Chief Phil Fontaine says it has been suggested that Pope Francis could travel this summer. He expects the Pope to make that clear during a meeting tomorrow with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit delegates. Back here at home, there is some growth-related news about the economy, some being the key word here. Statistics Canada reports the economy grew 0.2% in January. This comes as surging COVID-19 cases prompted another round of restrictions. Goods-producing industries drove the gains, with wholesale trade posting its largest monthly gain since July 2020. But the service sector registered zero growth, with accommodation and food services. And the arts, entertainment, and recreation sectors recorded their largest monthly declines since the pandemic started. In the nation's capital, the University of Ottawa is going to conduct a review of the Department of Indigenous Services to identify ways that it discriminates against First Nations children. In 2016, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal found the federal government discriminated against First Nations children by refusing to provide the same level of funding to child and family services on reserve as provinces did for those living off reserve. Advocates say an important question for the review will be why Ottawa continued underfunding services when there have been findings showing that has been happening as far back as the early 20th century. Turning to a new report by the National Housing Council, which recommends Ottawa invest at least $6.3 billion by the end of next year to deal with Indigenous housing needs. It says that is what's needed to address the needs of Indigenous peoples living in cities and towns, as well as rural and northern communities. The report says the spending could buy the government time to develop a longer-term strategy. While a major supply chain is cutting production in Western Canada, Canfor Corporation says it is cutting production at its sawmills. This is due to what it says are the cumulative effects of the global supply chain crisis that has been ongoing for several months. Effective April 4th, the reduced schedules are set to remain in effect for a minimum of 4 weeks. The company says the move will impact production capacity by a minimum of 100 million board feet. Closures are also hitting Atlantic Canada. The Federal Fisheries Department says it is closing the Atlantic mackerel and commercial bait fisheries. This is over concerns that dwindling stocks have entered a critical zone. The department says urgent action is needed to help preserve the stock of southern Gulf spring herring and Atlantic mackerel with the closures in Atlantic Canada and Quebec. Martin Mallett of the Maritime Fishermen's Union says the move is a complete surprise to the industry, and it will have far-reaching effects on lobster and crab fisheries. DFO says it is now turning its focus to investing in projects that support alternative forms of bait. Meanwhile, the largest beef suppliers in Canada are facing a class action lawsuit for allegedly conspiring to restrict competition and raise prices on beef sold in Quebec. The lawsuit was filed by the Belleux-Lapointe law firm on March 24th in Quebec Superior Court. It alleges that various companies related to Cargill, JBS Canada, Tyson Food, and National Beef Packing acted in concert to unduly restrict competition. The plaintiffs say the meatpacking plants control 85% of the Canadian beef market and 80% of the U.S. market. Moving to Saskatchewan now, where organizations in Saskatoon and Regina are joining forces to host an international hockey tournament that was supposed to be held in Russia. Russia lost its rights to host the 2023 International Ice Hockey Federation World Junior Championships due to its invasion of Ukraine. Tourism Saskatoon and Tourism Regina say the tournament could mean a $50 million jolt to the province's economy. After the break, we look at the big con. We'll be speaking with Thomas Caldwell, the chairman of Caldwell Securities Limited, up next. That and, of course, more news from around the world, so stay tuned. We'll be right back here on Forum Daily. As the world of investment becomes more mainstream and markets evolve to include new ways to invest and trade, potential investors are surrounded by ads promoting easy investing, lower fees, and convenience. But according to those who have been in the game for over a decade now, easy and cheap won't necessarily amount to profits for investors. Joining us now to give us a deeper understanding of this is Thomas Caldwell, chairman of Caldwell Securities Limited. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima.
And today we're talking about something very near and dear to your heart, sir, something you refer to as the big con. So what exactly is it?
I think investors have been subjected for years now to a barrage of advertisements and media bias indicating or trying to convince people that investment success is based upon the transaction cost, that is what you pay to buy or sell securities, or lower fees. That is absolute nonsense. You know, the whole key to investment success, it's about ideas, the quality of those ideas. It's also about controlling your emotions. That's critical. I've seen more money lost through emotional trading than anything else. So ideas and controlling your emotions. And the only way you can filter through both of those is with experience. And that means investment advice. So for me, I don't care what I pay in a transaction cost. I don't care what I pay in fees. I don't want the cheapest provider. I want the best provider. I don't hire analysts on how cheap I can get them. I hire them on the basis of how good they are. And that should be you as the investor thinking these terms. But they've been sold a big bill of goods. And I think it's a con in many cases, using skewed statistics and skewed numbers. For example, saying, oh, why do I pay these excess fees? I can have all this extra money. Well, you're assuming you're not getting value for those slightly higher fees. You should not be focused on the fraction of 1%, whether you buy or sell. It's ideas and emotions. And that getting off that focus, frankly, is a lie. And I think it's false advertising in many cases.
And from the sounds of this, investors are being misled, sir. So do you think regulators should do something about this?
Well, let me put it this way. I think some of the advertisements are misleading. And yes, they should. But sometimes I think regulators are selective on the things they want to focus on, with their primary focus being more jobs for regulators. But I do think that they should maybe look at some of the advertising practices of some discount firms, really demeaning the rest of the industry and demeaning getting advice, or demeaning being sure of an idea or more sure of an idea, or the quality of ideas. I've been a trader my whole life, and not just a couple of decades, over 55 years. I know what works and I know what doesn't work. And most people do not have the temperament to be trading by themselves. I can tell you that. I can look back over my years and I can think of about 14 or 15 people I knew as traders who took their own lives because of the losses they endured.
Wow. Well, from the sounds of this, how does this impact investors and their portfolios in the long run through this discount investing, sir?
Well, it isn't. I'm not blaming discount investing. I'm blaming the practice of demeaning advice. And I think it does impact them because a lot of young investors are going to get killed, believe it or not. I mean, figuratively speaking, they're going to come out and they're going to be handed their heads eventually. And the advertising, oh, I can buy a house with all the money I saved. No, if you're trading yourself, you're more likely to lose your house than to get your house. Or I love these ads. You know the ads, listen, are you still using our parents' old broker? Well, the parents and their old advisors are the ones who probably generated the money for them to have a down payment on their house, or to have the money to invest, or to get educated, or to be raised. So I think these types of advertising doesn't help people. And remember, there's a lot of information out there too. Too much information. Too much information is no information. So you need people to filter through what's important, because you don't know where the real deals are in great stacks of information that we're inundated with every day.
All right, sir, just about a minute left here, but how can investors really weed through all of these options and identify top quality investment professionals amid all of these mass brokerages to choose from?
Well, I think the most important thing is go down and I know people don't do it these days. Go down and sit with a few people, interview them, and see how you feel. And by the way, women are very good at this. And I know this sounds kind of sexist, but women are far more intuitive when it comes to sizing people up. So if you're married, bring your wife with you. But at any rate, go and meet a few people, talk to them. And you want to know, is this person experienced? And more importantly, is he or she for me? Are they just trying to sell me a product? Or are they trying to be a truly legitimate client first advisor? And there are lots of them out there. In my career, most people in this industry try to do the right thing. There can be people making mistakes, but most people try to do the right thing.
Always a very informative conversation, Mr. Caldwell. Thank you again for your time today.
You're very welcome. All the best.
Welcome back. Up next, we have Forum Daily's Market Update with Catherine Murray. Catherine is the host of The Buck Stops Here, and she joins us now. Take it away, Catherine.
Thanks, Seema. Hello, everyone, and welcome to your weekly market recap. I am Catherine Murray. Well, we are seeing markets trade mostly lower today, but that is after seeing some nice gains recently. We are, however, seeing the price of crude oil trade down by about 4.2% off the worst levels of the day. This as the White House plans to release 1 million barrels per day for the next 6 months from the SPR, or the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. This is actually the third time that that's happened in the past 6 months. And in total, we'll see about 180 million barrels released from the SPR, the largest in history. But as you can see, even though WTI is trading lower today, we're still trading near the highest range we've seen in a decade. So obviously the market is still believing that the demand far outstrips the supply from the SPR. And we're also recognizing as well that OPEC Plus only agreed to release an additional 432,000 barrels per day. So again, demand outstripping supply. Interestingly as well, we've heard from Putin that today he signed a decree that gas exports must be paid in rubles. This ahead of another supposed peace talks between Russia and Ukraine tomorrow. Also importantly as well, and obviously there's skepticism in the market in terms of how that will play out, we did hear from President Zelensky saying that Ukrainian forces are preparing for new Russian attacks in the southeast region. Stepping back, when we think about the broader equity markets and market narrative, including fixed income, really there are a number of bearish talking points that I want to hit on today. One is the FOMC minutes. They'll be released next Wednesday. There will be absolutely extra focus on the details of the pace of the balance sheet runoff. In other words, taking money out of the system. There's also, of course, a resurgence of COVID cases in the international markets that's weighing on global growth concerns. We also have elevated inflation numbers as oil hovers near its highest levels, I mentioned, in 10 years. So no change there. There's also, of course, concerns surrounding the yield curve inversion. This is another bearish talking point, and whether or not that is signaling there is a recession to come also, of course, calls into question whether or not the U.S. Federal Reserve will make a policy mistake by raising rates too fast and pulling money out of the system too fast. Lastly, on the concern side for the market movements will be the first quarter earnings season, which kicks off essentially this coming week. So there are some continued concerns that are perhaps weighing on the market movement right now. On the U.S. economic front, PCE, personal consumption expenditure, was in line with consensus. It is an inflation reading. It was up 6.4% year over year. However, continued jobless claims hit a 1969 low. So there is still certainly a lot of strength in the labor market. In terms of stocks, there is, as I briefly mentioned, concerns surrounding the consumer feeling the pain of inflation. And you did see Tempur Sealy, TPX is the ticker there, have a negative first quarter pre-announcement, flagging geopolitical concerns and a decrease in consumer confidence, and of course, new COVID outbreaks on the international front. Away from that, when we think about the market, Canada, gas prices obviously front and center, as the carbon tax increase is set to take place tomorrow. Of course, the Conservatives are against this hike. We've seen Alberta dropping the gas tax, sales tax. Economic data here in Canada, GDP grew 0.2% in January. Significant strength in construction, that was up by 2.8%. Wholesale trade up 3.1%. All of these numbers, which are on the positive side, might put some pressure on the Bank of Canada to raise rates faster than expected. That decision from the BOC will take place on April the 13th. So be aware that that is coming to a movie theater near you. Away from that, when we think about the BOC and the tone that they might take, housing affordability is certainly a concern for Canadians. RBC is out with a report saying housing affordability is the worst we've seen in 31 years. The TSX, little change right now. Just a couple stocks mentioned. CCO, which is Chemico, it's a uranium company that was upgraded to an outperformer over BMO, Bank of Montreal. RBC is buying a very prominent UK money manager for $2.6 billion, so adding there. And Magna resumed coverage at RBC with an overweight position. Nima, a lot going on, a lot to wait for. FOMC minutes will be front and center. The BOC decision will be front and center. And first quarter earnings and guidance. Will these companies feel the pressure to guide lower? Nima, I'll leave it there. Back to you.
Lots to keep our eyes on, Catherine. Thanks for that. You can get more analysis and news on the markets with Catherine Murray on The Buck Stops here. All right, stay with us. We'll have news on the Ukraine war, energy prices, and inflation up next. Stay with us. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Russia promised to de-escalate operations near Kyiv, but it appears that units are not withdrawing, just merely repositioning. He says Russia is trying to regroup, resupply, and reinforce its offensive in the Donbas region. Heavy fighting is reported on the outskirts of Kyiv and other zones. This comes as a convoy of buses heads to Mariupol in another bid to evacuate people from the besieged city after the Russian military agreed to a limited ceasefire in the area. Meanwhile, a Kremlin decree published by state media says unfriendly countries can continue to pay for natural gas in foreign currency through a Russian bank that will convert the money into rubles. President Vladimir Putin talked tougher on Thursday, saying Russia will start accepting ruble payments for its gas supplies from unfriendly countries, starting on Friday. And that contracts will be stopped if buyers don't sign up to the new conditions. He says to buy gas, customers would have to open ruble accounts in Russian banks. The decree Mr. Putin signed says a designated bank will open 2 accounts for each buyer, one in foreign currency and one in rubles. Well, this comes as OPEC and allied oil producers, including Russia, have agreed to stay on a schedule of gradual production increases. That decision will support higher prices that are fueling inflation. To combat soaring gas prices, U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered the release of up to 1 million barrels per day from strategic petroleum reserves. The White House says the oil will flow for 6 months to control spiking energy prices. All right, taking a deeper look at inflation now. An inflation gauge closely monitored by the Federal Reserve saw a 6.4% jump in February compared with a year ago. This comes as a sharply higher price for food, gasoline, and other necessities is squeezing Americans' finances. The figure reported on Thursday by the Commerce Department was the largest year-over-year rise since January 1982. Excluding volatile prices for food and energy, so-called core inflation increased 5.4% in February from 12 months ago. To the east, China and the Solomon Islands have signed a draft version of a security pact, which could see Chinese police and other forces take up duties in the Pacific Island nation. This is drawing concerns from traditional partners, including New Zealand, Australia, and others. The Solomon Islands government on Thursday said the draft agreement had been initialed by representatives of the two sides, and they will now be cleaned up and await signatures of the two countries' foreign ministers. It said the agreement aims to respond to Solomon Islands' soft and hard domestic threats. Solomon Islands continues to roll out the implementation of its national security strategy and uphold its foreign policy of friends to all and enemies to none. Trouble is brewing for FIFA. A Norwegian soccer official has delivered a scathing criticism of World Cup host Qatar and FIFA to an audience of executives on the eve of the tournament's draw. Qatar's record of protecting the rights of migrant workers and its criminalization of homosexuality was aired by the newly elected head of soccer in Norway. Lise Klaveness is one of the few women ever to lead a FIFA member federation. It was a rare show of dissent and tension in the typically tightly scripted annual meeting. And it targeted issues that have dogged Qatar and FIFA's controversial choice of the Middle Eastern country for more than a decade. Well, with all the attention on the Ukraine war, advocates remind people of the struggles in Afghanistan. The UN's Aid Coordination Agency is launching its biggest ever appeal for funds for a single country in hopes of collecting $4.4 billion to help Afghanistan. The ambitious call to assist the impoverished country, again run by Taliban militants, comes as much of the world is focused on Russia's war in Ukraine. Afghanistan is buckling under a debilitating humanitarian crisis, acute food insecurity, and an economy in freefall, only months after the Taliban seized power again. Well, if you're a fan of space exploration, you may be going starry-eyed. Astronomers have imaged the most distant star yet. It's a super hot, super bright giant that formed nearly 13 billion years ago at the dawn of the cosmos. But this luminous blue star is long gone, so massive that it almost certainly exploded just a few million years after emerging. Its swift demise makes it all the more incredible that an international team spotted it with observations by the Hubble Space Telescope. Their findings were published on Wednesday in the scientific journal Nature. The previous record holder is also a blue supergiant star spotted by Hubble. It formed about 9 billion years ago. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website at thenewsforum.ca, and be sure to follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily News.